never like any other. What do I get?
So I want to tell you about a man named Jeffrey Babbitt. He doesn't twerk. He's not an MMA fighter. He doesn't snark on Twitter. He was 62 years old. He lived with and took care of his 93-year-old mother who has Alzheimer's. The man was obsessed with trains and comic books. He was a train conductor. He probably was never cool, but most likely always harmless. His neighbors described him as gentle. Described, that's past tense. Yes, if you were to Google Jeffrey's name, you'd come up with only one hit, the one that killed him. LaShawn Martin, a cowardly fiend, claimed he was going to punch the first white guy he saw. Jeffrey ticked both those boxes. So he hit Jeffrey, a sweet old man caring for his mother. He died at the hospital, and now she, his mother, has no one. This might be the first time you've heard about this story, maybe because it's a local story. But what's a local story in the internet age? That's a BS dodge, ignored when there's a story the press wants to tell. Jeffrey should be a national story, but his death is not fashionable. His face will never be seen on a shirt worn by a big star. Hell, I'd have to do a monologue on Jeffrey every day for a year to strike a balance. But his death is a reminder of evil and the cowardice that fuels it. Despite progress, we live in unforgiving chaos. The least we can do is condemn such acts, as well as the pathetic media concerned with evil that only fits their narrative. You want to talk about crime? Sure, let's talk about crime. But let's talk about all of it. Giving less than half the story is worse than no story at all. So this is yet to be judged as a hate crime, but I'm guessing when somebody is walking through Union Square in New York City saying, I'm going to hit the first white man I see, I would call that a hate crime, Dana.
And I would imagine that if anybody heard him, they probably just looked away and hoped that it would dissipate and that they wouldn't have to get involved.
Yeah.
Well, two people came to his aid, and he beat them up, too.
Yeah, two people tried to jump in.
But then again, you would think if someone stood up and said Allah Akbar with a gun and then blew away 13 or 14 people, depending on your perspective, you would probably call that a jihad as well, not a workplace violence.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Bob, if we're going to discuss violence and injustice, shouldn't we cover it all?
Yeah, I mean, listen, from my standpoint, I've spent an awful lot of time talking about, during the Civil Rights days, white people who were beating up and committing hate crimes against blacks. In this case, I think it's as very clear as you could possibly be. If somebody makes an announcement, I'm out here to kill a white person because I hate white people, and then he proceeds to do it, then there's absolutely no question that the definition of that is a hate crime. And I wish there's another example of when some people like Al Sharpton and others could stand up and say, this is just not acceptable.
Good point. Andrea?
Well, I have another example if they don't want to jump up to this one. Just today in the New York Post, there's a story about a bus rider in Manhattan who had his face bashed in, Greg, a white man by a black man who called him a cracker and then punched him in the face. They're saying that this is a hate attack. And an officer said this: a few months ago, you wouldn't have a problem stopping somebody, but now we can't do that because of the stop and frisk prohibits, and now we're going to have to second guess yourself. This from a cop. So thanks for that, liberal lunatics.